Nigel, shall we start with some numbers?
Yeah.
Well, what numbers of mountains have you climbed?
Well, let me explain, Candy. There's 3 lists of hills in the Highlands. The Munros everybody knows about, and they are the hills over 3,000 feet in height, and there's 282 of those. Now, the next list is from 2,500 to 3,000, and they are called the Corbett's, and there's 221 of those. And the third list, they are the Grahams, and there's 224 of those. So in total, if my maths is right, there's 721, and I'm going by what's called the imperial list. All these, I'm talking about feet, aren't I? So it's over 3,000 feet, 2.5 to 3,000 feet, and 2,000 to 2,500 feet. Munro's highest, Corbett's middle, and Graham's lowest.
And you've done every one of those?
Yes, that just shows I'm a geek, doesn't it?
Well, that's one way of putting it.
I've ticked up every one, yeah.
Over what period?
Well, I found out what the Munros were in 1978, and then I thought, oh, maybe I should have a go at climbing them all, which actually only took 11 years. And then I thought, well, I'll try for the Corbetts. Now, let's say work got in the way, and I did most of those in winter. So obviously up in the Highlands in winter there's not much daylight. Anyway, that took 20 years, so I finished the Corbetts 2010. And then I said, oh, I'll do a few Grahams, and I said to people, I'll stop at 100, and I did say that, I'll stop, and then I got to 100 and I thought, well, maybe I shall push on. So I did actually push on to finish the Grahams last month. Yeah.
I mean, in that time you've had a family and everything.
Exactly.
So...
Well, I've got it says a lot. A major player in this is Judith, who's let me do it. I was once walking with a lady in the Lake District, and she said, how come your wife lets you go away so long and so often? I said, well, maybe if you live with me, you would let me go.
So what drives you to do it then?
It's a mixture of things, Candy. First of all, I've got a sort of deep sense of being whole when I'm among mountains. It's hard to say, really. I feel as though that is where I belong, and obviously on a nice day that's true for everybody. But even when it's horrible weather, I still feel this is where I belong. There's a sort of lack of, not quite tension. There's a lack of unease. There's a great ease there, and so it's it's possibly a spiritual thing. It's certainly it's to do with connection with the landscape, yeah.
Yes, because you and I met through the Methodist Church.
Yeah.
So is there a link there with your faith?
Well, obviously, you're very aware of the landscape, but particularly when you're on your own, and so in a way you're connecting to the earth and the landscape and the wildlife, and in a way that points you through to. If you've got faith, points you through to the Creator. Yeah.
On the other side of that, have there ever been any crises?
Well, obviously, if you do that much, and particularly in winter, I got near once, and it happened to be Burns night, and obviously it was dark about 3:30, and I won't give you the full story, but I got to this house at 7 o'clock at night. And where there was a light, I got to this lonely house, and I said, because I got friends in a cottage who were obviously, and they'd begun to call the mountain rescue out, the Scottish Mountain Rescue, but anyway, I told them to cancel it because they hadn't come out. They just got the warning. So that was. There's a lovely expression, Candy. It is. Experience is surviving your near misses, if you see what I mean. So I keep surviving, and experience is surviving your near misses. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So, are there any tips for people that you think to keep safe in the mountains?
Well, now equipment's good. Now you might be able to signal phone-wise, but always leave your route. So that if you don't get back, say I'm going to be back at 7, and you're back at 10, and if I leave a route. I say, well, don't do anything unless I'm 4 hours after I should be back. But there's a recently when I've been on the Grahams, which are so lonely, and some of them are so far in Candy. I mean, I mustn't major on this, but some of them are 54k there and back. So that's a big day, isn't it? And you're on your own. I should have said, stop wittering, Grandad. But basically, I've got a thing called a personal locator beacon, which is only that big. And if something went wrong, say I broke my leg or twisted my ankle and I couldn't crawl out, I would set that off and I would get rescued that way. I've only had that 4 years.
And never had to use it yet?
No, but it's called a personal locator, and I've registered it. And you pull the aerial out and you send a signal, and so that's to make my wife a bit easier, because obviously I keep coming back, but you never know, do you?
No. And where does camping come in with this?
Well, some of the Munros and some of the Corbetts and some of the Grahams, you've got to what's called wild camp. You either do a 14-hour day, which is a huge day, which you can do, but if there's a lot in there, there's how can I say this? If you get a map of the Lake District, there's no hill in the lakes more than 3 hours from a road, because the roads, beautiful as it is, the Lake District is fairly manicured really and tame. But the Highlands, you can get a map, and an OS map, 1 in 50,000, and there's just a road at the top and a road at the bottom. And these are you're talking about 7 or 8 hours to get in to climb the hill, and that's another 7 or 8. Well, if there's a group in there, you might as well go and camp, which I've done. That's wild camping. And if you're 20s, 30s, that's okay. But as you get older, the stuff's although the stuff is getting lighter, you're thinking, oh, hang on now. I've taken now to taking a slightly bigger tent to campsites and pushing the boat out, paying about £12 a night sometimes. But actually, hostels, you can pay £26 to share a dormitory of 8 people, and 3/4 of whom are snoring their heads off. So you're better, to be honest, you're better camping. So it's it's either wild camping right among the mountains, or now at my age on campsites, let's say where there's toilets and showers and it's all very civilized.
That sounds good to me, yes. But you do have an extra thing to take into consideration, don't you?
Yeah, well, although it doesn't define me, Candy, in 1982 I was diagnosed as with what's now called insulin-dependent diabetes, and it is what's called a chronic condition, and you've got to manage it. If you're careful with this one, if you don't bother with it, you get complications pretty soon, say 10, 15, 20 years. But if you run it too low, you go into what's called hypos, where your brain doesn't work and you collapse and can go into a coma. So you're walking this kind of like a curve. Let's call it, you're walking on a curve, not too high, not too low. And that's obviously had to be considered. And I think particularly you've got if I'm walking hard, I'll eat a bit of carbohydrate, like a bit of flapjack or a bit of all bran loaf or a ginger biscuit every half hour. And if you do a really big day, you'll eat 20 pieces, because it's every half hour. You're just feeding it's a bit like driving a car with a hole in the petrol tank, really. You need to keep topping up. Yeah,
but it hasn't stopped you at all.
I think you've got to say, when you sort of become aware of something like this, you say, well, can I get on with my life? And then you've got to make not quite the effort. You've got to decide to do so. Yeah.
Very positive.
Yeah.
Now this is probably quite a mean question.
Yeah.
More than 700 peaks.
Yeah.
Do you have a favourite?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It's asked a lot. I've kept a diary for every single one, and it's the route, the weather, which defines the views, and then the company, if there is any, because I do a lot on my own. And then the extras like wildlife or ice formations or waterfalls. And for any mountain, the weather and the views can define it. So let's say an inverted commas boring mountain. Occasionally in winter you get what's called temperature inversions, and you climb up out of the cloud. I mean, it's not so common in this country because the mountains are small, but you're walking through grey and cold and frost. And then at say about 2,500, you pop out into warmth, 7 degrees, and sun, and there's a huge sea of cloud, and all the tops pointing up. and that can happen. In that hill, that might be boring normally, but it's a transformational, uplifting time, you know. And occasionally, there's a thing called a Brockenspector, where your shadow is projected onto a bank of cloud, and even better is you get a glory, which is a circular rainbow around your head, walking with you as you walk. So they're quite rare, but obviously if you do a lot, you get bad weather and rare moments of find the right word, rare moments of exquisite sort of memories. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think I want one final question. You were obviously brought up in the Lake District, where we've got a lot of camping and caravanning club sites. What would you recommend if people were thinking of a relatively easy walk in the lakes?
Oh, well, obviously it's called the lakes because of the lakes. There's two of the smaller lakes are Rydal Water and Grasmere. Now you can walk round either of them, and that's a walk. But a super walk actually is from Rydal past Rydal Water and then to Grasmere, into Grasmere. And if you do that walk one way, then there's a bus running every half hour called the 555, which runs from Keswick to Lancaster. And there's a wonderful expression, Candy. You don't have to climb mountains. There's a wonderful expression, and I'm getting there, obviously 74. When you're among mountains, you're in the presence of mountains, and that's an easy walk. There's super paths. So you walk really from Rydal to Grasmere, passing on the west side the two small lakes of Rydal and Grasmere. Yeah, I'd recommend that. My wife does that when she needs a new hip, so she's doing that now.
Thank you very much indeed.